Today's daf is daf Chaf Vav, and we start with the Mishnah, which is about 10 lines down from the top. Bas Yisrael lo tiyaled es hovedes kochavim. So let's introduce this Mishnah with the following statement. The idol worshippers at that time were dangerous Jew haters. I'm not sure the situation today is that much better. And therefore, the Mishnah is going to worry about the possibility that the idol worshiper will kill a Jew and specifically kill a Jewish baby.
Have a great day. Learn a lot of Torah.
Thank you. So therefore, when a Jewish woman wants to hire a midwife who's an idolater, she has to be worried about the fact that the idolater, after having brought out the baby, will kill the baby. On the other hand, we have a different problem in a case where a Jewish girl wants to be a midwife to bring into birth an idolater. So therefore the Mishnah says, Bas Yisrael lo tiyaled es avodas kochavim. An Israeli woman should not deliver the child if it's an idolatrist. Mipnei shemiyaledes ben lavodas kochavim. She's basically she's aiding the process by which there'll be another Jew hater who's going to try to kill the Jews. The Mishnah, quoting the Shita, the Tanakama, the Mishnah is now reflecting the Rabbanan Shita. We'll see that Rav Meir is going to disagree, is very permissive, allowing a Jewish pregnant woman to hire an idolatrist as a midwife. And the Mishnah is based on the premise that we don't have to suspect that the midwife, who's an idolatress, will kill the baby. Maybe because she's being paid for the job and therefore she doesn't want to risk losing the job. Or maybe because we can watch her and supervise her as she delivers the child. Now, there's going to be a second part of this Mishnah which sort of parallels the first part of the Mishnah with regard not to not to mialedes, but rather to meinika. And the Mishnah says, Bas Yisrael otonik b'no shel ovedes kochavim. Once again, a Jewish woman should not help the health and the well-being of an idolatress, or the child might be a male or a female, doesn't matter either way. And therefore, the Jewish woman should not serve as a wet nurse for the baby of an idolatress. Now, the Gemara is going to raise the following problem. If the Jewish woman refuses to nurse the baby of the idolatress, is that going to cause Ava? If that's going to just jack up and intensify the hatred towards the Jew. Now let's understand that the Mishnah is now addressing the question of a Jewish woman hiring an adulteress as a wet nurse, but keep in mind, Birshusa, we could possibly be lenient about this if the nursing process is taking place solely, exclusively in the house of the Jewish woman, because then we can supervise this idolatress who's serving as a wet nurse to make sure that she doesn't kill the baby. But if we were to bring that Jewish child over to the house of the idolatress to be nursed there, that would clearly be prohibited because we're afraid that the idolatress will put this baby to death. Tana Rabbana. The Gemara now quotes a brisa, and this brisa is going to introduce a chumrah, a more stringent view than that of the Mishnah, and this is going to be Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir does not accept any of these protective kind of situations where we think that there's no fear of murder. But Bas Yisrael lo tiyalid es avodas kolchavim mipnei shemiyaledes ben lavodas kolchavim. This we already saw in our Mishnah. So here the Bryce is just reiterating what we knew and what we saw from our Mishnah. But Ovedes kolchavim lo tiyaled es Bas Yisrael. Our Mishnah said that you're allowed to hire an idolatress as to deliver the baby of a Jewish child, right, as a mialedes, and the only condition that the Mishnah had stipulated was that this should happen in the reshus of the Yisraelis, so that you could hire, according to our Mishnah, a midwife who's an idolatress, then we don't have to worry about the suspicion that the idolatress will kill the baby. But here, in the Brisa, it says, Ovedes kolchavim lo tiyaled es bas Yisrael. So we cannot hire an idolatress as a midwife. Imagine, it's taking place in the house of the Jews, and yet there's, according to Rebbe Meir's machmer, he says we still have to be afraid of murder. The Chacham, as we saw already in our Mishnah, they are more liberal, and Ovedes kolchavim mialedes es bas Yisrael. Under what conditions will the Chachamim permit hiring an idolatress as a midwife to deliver a Jewish child? Bisman she acheros omdos al gaba, meaning that it's not just the pregnant Jewish woman alone with the idolatrous midwife who's delivering the baby, but rather there are others over there. Again, it's not a private place, but it is a private place, but there are other people there, and she would not try to kill the baby because she'll be caught red-handed on the spot, and that deters her. But if it's just the pregnant woman who's delivering the baby together with the midwife who's an idolatress, then if they're alone, then even the Chachamim, who will allow hiring an idolatress as a midwife, against the Shita Reb Meir. Reb Meir has a flat, absolute prohibition. Under no circumstances whatsoever will Rabbi Meir tolerate hiring an idolatress as a midwife to deliver a Jewish child. He's always going to be afraid of murder. But the Chachamim say, you know what? Let the idolatress deliver the baby, and serve the function as a midwife if there are other women around to deter her and instill the fear of the Lord in her heart. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, Reb Meir made an absolute statement in which he prohibited an idolatress as a midwife under all circumstances? Why should that be so? There are acheres omdos al gava. There are other Jewish women who are standing around, and why would the non-Jewish woman murder the baby? Everybody's going to see it. And the Gemara answers that Rabbi Meir is based on the following chashash: Zimnin de mancha le yode afuvta, v'kat lev lo mitchazer. It's unbelievable. The midwife could kill the baby without anyone knowing that she killed the baby, even though there are others around. How could that be possible? And the answer is that she presses down on the forehead of the child and just squishes the membrane of the brain without anyone knowing about it. And not only that, the Gemara demonstrates this by telling the following story. One idolatress said to her friend, another idolatress, Molda Yudasa Bas Molada Yudasa. This woman who's an idolatress starts ranking out this midwife idolatress by saying, you know what? You're a midwife for the Jews, and you help bring Jewish children into this world, and not only that, your mother was also a midwife for the Jews. You're a lousy bum, you. Amrolay. So the midwife replied, "You think that I let the Jews live when I served and functioned as a midwife? Nefishin bishta lahayisisa. I have spilled the blood of the Jews like the foam on a raging river. How is that so? Because you know the number of Jewish children that I murdered? She was boasting about all the Jewish children that she murdered. And yet, there were other Jews around when she delivered the child. She was able to murder the child without anyone knowing about it. So what are Rabbana going to do with that story? You see that the midwife, the idolatrous midwife, could murder the baby without anyone knowing about it. The Milsa Bialma Hudo Kimna. She was just using this phrase, these words, to try to boast about the fact that she killed Jews, when in fact she never killed any Jews. So just to summarize, what we have until now is a machlokas between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. Fundamentally, even the Chachamim agreed to Rabbi Meir's position that we have to worry about the fact that a midwife, an idolatrous midwife, would kill a Jewish baby. That's what they want to do. But the Chachamim say there's a certain safeguard that instills fear in the heart of the non-Jewish idolatrous midwife when there are other women around. Rabbi Meir has an absolute prohibition. You cannot hire a non-Jewish midwife. And if you'll tell me, well, there are other Jews around that are safeguard that'll see and instill the fear and inhibit her, no, because she could kill the baby without anyone knowing about it. And the Chacham say, no, that's not so. The Mishnah now goes on to the case of a wet nurse. Bas Yisrael Lotanik. We don't want to help bring up a non-Jewish idolatrous child, and therefore don't serve as a Jewish woman should not serve as a wet nurse for the child of an idolatress. Tana Rabbana, we have a brisa, and once again the brisa is going to record a machlokas between the Chacham and Rabbi Meir, where the Chacham Mekil and Rabbi Meir is machmir. Bas Yisrael Lotinok bina shel Ovedes Kochavet mipnei shemagadelis ben li Ovedes Kochavet. Now we have a chumrah that we don't have in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah permits hiring an idolatress as a wet nurse for a Jewish child, and this brisa, quoting Rabbi Meir, prohibits it. And why? Mipnei shechashuda al shvichas damim. The wet nurse will take the opportunity when no one's around to look, and she'll kill the baby. Now, once again, we have to ask the question on Reb Meir. What do you mean she's going to kill the baby? Everyone's going to know about it. She'll be in fear. So we're going to soon see that Reb Meir argues there's a way of her killing the baby through the nursing process, and no one will know about it. Chachamim omrim Ovedes Kochav menika es bina shel bas Yisrael bisman shacheres homdos al gaman avlo beino leveina. If the wet nurse is alone with the Jewish child, that's a problem. And even Chacham agree that we have to suspect that the wet nurse will take the opportunity to murder the child. But if there are others around, and it's not just the baby alone with the wet nurse, but we have, other women, let's say, who are Jewish women who are safeguarding, then she'll be inhibited, and the wet nurse who's an idolatress will not kill the baby. Rav Meir Omer. What's Rav Meir going to argue here? There are others around, and certainly that would inhibit her. Says Rav Meir, she can kill the baby without anyone knowing about it. Before she started the nursing process, she smeared on her body a poisonous substance. And now the baby, when it sucks from the breast of this wet nurse who's and is going to be killed by the toxic substance. And apparently Chacham are not afraid of that. That far we don't have to worry. I have a question on this whole sugya, which maybe you can help me with. Rashi says in Chumash that the reason why Miriam, the sister of Moshe Rabbeinu, stood there and then suggested to Bas Paro that we have a Jewish woman who's willing to nurse this baby is because Moshe Rabbeinu should not be nursing from the breast of a non-Jewish woman. And that's brought down in Shulchan Aruch. I don't know how to square that with this Gemara. This Gemara seems to be focused on exclusively one problem, and that is whether or not we have to worry that the wet nurse might kill the baby. Utzricha. Why do we need, in this brisa, to repeat the machlokes between Rabbi Meir Chachamim twice? Once with regard to mialedes, a midwife, and once with regard to a meinika, a wet nurse. Diashmina mialedes, if you only told me that the Chachamim were lenient in the case of a midwife, that's only delo efsha, mishum dacheres rososo. Chachamim rely on the fact that there are other women around, and that will inhibit the midwife from killing the baby. Aval meinika. What about the whole story of the wet nurse who smeared that toxic substance on her breast? The efsha the shayfile sam lidad me'abroi v'katale ema module Rabbi Meir. So we have a gewaldige chiddush that even in the case of a wet nurse, rechachama mekil, as long as others are around and they're not alone together, the idolatrous wet nurse with the baby. And the reason for that is they're not choshesh for the idolatrous to do this whole smearing business to kill the baby. And if you'll tell me, well, the chachama mekil even in the case of meinika, as long as others are around, and therefore kolshkein, I would certainly derive the conclusion that in the case of mialedes, the chacham would likewise be permissible. But I need a chiddush here for Rabbi Meir. I would have said that in the case of Meinika, Reb Meir holds it's also because Mishum Deshaifale Sam Lidad Me'abroi she can smear her breast with this toxic substance and kill the baby. Nobody will know the difference. Aval mialedes lo efshar mialedes, in the case of midwife who delivers the baby, has no possibility of smearing anything, and everyone's going to know that she killed the baby. And therefore, lo efsha, she cannot kill the baby without being notified, without others knowing about it, because acheres omdos al gaba, ema module, lirabana, maybe they would be moded to rabbanim be mekil, tzricha, therefore we need a kamashmal and know that even though there are others around, she has a way of murdering the baby without anyone seeing it by pressing down on the membrane of the baby's brain. Uramini, and the Gemara now finds a contradiction to this chumrah that we saw, that a Jewish woman should not be a midwife for an idolatress. Why? Because in doing so, she's bringing up a child for idolatry and for murder eventually. Uramini, but I ask you a kasha stira from a brisa. Yehudis me'aledis ovedis kolcham b'schar. The brisa allows a Jewish woman to serve as a mialedes, as a midwife, to deliver a baby of an idolatress, as long as she's getting paid for it. Omar Rav Yosef b'schar shari mishum eva. They came up with a new kula that if the idolatress who gave birth to a baby if the idolatress is pregnant about to give birth to a baby and is willing to hire a Jewish midwife and offer her wages, and now the Jewish woman says, no, I can't take the job, says Rav Yosef, that's going to cause Ava. What do you mean? Yeah, I'm offering you a good salary to be a mialedes, a midwife, and deliver my child, and you refuse it? That's going to certainly intensify the hatred against the Jew. Amar Abaye. I'm sorry. Sovar. Sovar Rav Yosef Meimar. Olu de Ovedes Kocham b'Shabso b'Schar Shori. 1 second. Where's Abaye? Did I skip Abaye? Okay. I guess Abaye is coming a little bit later. Oh, Abaye is right around the corner. Just we have to add one sentence here in the Gemara before Abaye. Abaye is going to disagree with Rav Yosef. So that normally you're not allowed to be hired for work, you Jewish person, on Shabbos. And that's called schar Shabbasa. However, Rav Yosef claims that if an idolatrous woman who's pregnant and wants to hire a Jewish woman as a midwife to deliver the baby and offers her a salary, in that case, you're allowed to be a midwife and deliver the baby for schar. Why? Mishum. Because once again, the idolatrous woman is going to say, "What? You don't want to serve as my midwife to deliver my baby? I'm offering you a very fine salary." That's going to cause a tremendous amount of animosity and hatred. So that Rav Yosef, in two cases, bent the law and was liberal to be lenient about something that technically should be prohibited in a case of a Jewish woman serving as a midwife to deliver an idolatrous woman's child, and both kulos for the sake of avoiding Ava. Number one, the kula of taking the job as a midwife for money, for wages, for pay, to deliver the child of an idolatress. Number two, to do that work on Shabbos and get paid for it. Amalei Abaye says, what are you talking about? There's not going to be any Ava over here. It's very easy for a woman, a Jewish woman, to wiggle her way out of it and to find an excuse why she's not willing to take the job, accept the wages, and serve as a midwife to deliver the child of an idolatress. Why not? We're not going to violate the Shabbos. That's our religion. We have a religion that mandates us to observe the Shabbos. Now, we have to introduce here a Gemara at the end of Masechta Yoma. The Gemara says that we will violate the Shabbos for the sake of the life of a child or an adult for sure. But why? Because mutav sheyichal Shabbos achas v'lo mutav l'chal Shabbos achas k'dei sheyishmar Shabbos harbe. So this has nothing to do with the superiority of a Jew over a non-Jew. It has to do with the fact that we want to maximize the observance of Shabbos. So we can violate the Shabbos to bring a Jewish child into the world because that Jewish child will observe Shabbos. So we'll violate one Shabbos and make a pragmatic weight and come to a balance and come to the conclusion that for many Shabbosos there will be an observance of Shabbos. But for the sake of an idolatress, you're not willing to observe the Shabbos, obviously. So we can't violate the Shabbos on your behalf. I find this a little odd that according to Abaye's logic, the idolatress is going to accept this whole lumdus here, this whole justification explanation as to why the Jewish woman will not serve as a mialedes, as a midwife to deliver the child. So Rav Yosef Lemeimar, onuke b'schar shori, that you're allowed to, again, until now we're talking about a midwife. Now we're going to talk about a wet nurse. And Rabbi Yosef wants to say that I'm going to find a kula to allow a Jewish woman to serve as a wet nurse, to nurse the child of an idolatress. Why? Because the idolatress, the mother of this baby, is willing to pay wages to the Jewish woman to nurse the baby? What excuse is the Jewish woman gonna offer as to why she refuses the job and she's being paid for it? That's going to cause Ava. Abai again. Abai says, you know what? She, the Jewish woman who refuses to serve as a wet nurse to nurse the baby, could give a very good, solid excuse. Apparently, nursing is not so great for a young body, and if she's single and she wants to get married, it could weaken the body. Or if she's already married, so there's no fear of her not finding a mate. Lo dame bi api gavra. Nursing is a big, messy business, and my husband is not going to appreciate, if it's our baby, that's one thing, but if it's your baby, she's. So Rav Yossi Lebemer Hadesanya Oved Kochav Roy Behemas Daka Lo Malin Velo Moridin. So we have here what I call the middle of the road. What do I mean? The extreme is going to be moridin. Moridin means that we cause begrama, the death of someone that we want to kill. We want to implement the capital punishment, get rid of him. So that's called moridin. Moridin means we'll throw him into a deep pit. But here in these two categories of number one, Ovdei Kocham, and number two, Roy Behema Daka, what we're going to do is, if they fell in one of these categories, fell into a deep pit, we're not going to throw him in. We're not going to actively kill him, but we're not going to save him. And that's called Lo Ma'alin V'Lo Moridin. Lo Moridin means we don't throw him in, and Lo Ma'alin means we don't take him out when he's screaming for help. Asuki b'schar shori mishumeva. What happens if an idol worshiper falls into a deep pit and the other idol worshippers offer this Jew a salary, a payment, if he'll go down to the pit and raise up this idol worshiper saying his life? Says Rav Yosef, we will permit it. Again, Rav Yosef very consistent, Mishumeva, because if we're offering you money and you refuse it, it must be because you want to kill us. Wait a minute. He has an excuse. Koi bria igra. I'm very busy now. My son is in a dangerous situation. He's on top of a ledge that's very high, and he's moving towards the end of the ledge. I got to run up there and save my son. And the whole thing is gebluffed. Inami, another excuse he could give is Nikita li zimno lebei dvar. Beit dvar means the government is after me. They set up a time for me to show up, and if I don't show up for that appointment, I'm in deep trouble. So basically, Abai's philosophy is that you don't have to worry about Ava because you could always give an excuse. Why do you refuse the wages in order to be mala to save this idol worshiper? Basically, you have a right to say, you know what? According to Abai, you know what? Find yourself someone else to rescue this person. I'm not the only one on the face of the earth. Apparently, that's what Tosfos and other Rishonim point out. Even Abai would be moda if this justification, this explanation would not be acceptable. There's no one around to save him. Well, there's no sun on top, there's no ledge on top there or government, so forth and so on. Then even Abai would agree to Rav Yosef's position that Mishumeva, you're allowed to save this guy from the bottom of the pit. Honey, Rabbi Abba Kamed Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Avo, he was from Caesarea, if you remember. Anyway, he taught a brisa in the presence of Rabbi Yochanan, and the brisa says, "Ha'ovdei kochav v'roi behem adaka lo malim v'lo morid." So Magadle Behema Daka, shepherds for small animals, we are choshesh that they're constantly stealing and they bring their animals into the grazing areas of other people. And Ovdei Kochavim obviously violate one of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, which is a capital crime, namely worshipping idols.